I'm in the group now. Well, you're taking it. No, but if I
Okay, well, this is a great crowd. Super. This is as many as we had for our last poetry reading, I think, with Ron Kirchie, so that's just great. Well, our poet this evening, Felicity Sheehy, is, as most of you know, a graduate of Westover School class of 2010. So she's the second Westover alum selected as one of our Rennell poets, the first being Juana Marion, class of 1998, who read here in the fall of 2012. And of course, I hope in the years ahead that there'll be many more, that we can keep the tradition going. And who knows? I mean, that maybe our next Rennell poet may be sitting right here in the student section. He has a candidate already. And I'm pleased to say that it was our strong tradition in poetry and our literary magazine, The Lantern in particular, that was very much a factor in Felicity's decision to come to Westover in the first place. In her first year here, she was recognized for her writing in critical essays and short stories and of course poetry. And it was her poems, along with those of a number of quite extraordinary poets of that time, and the faculty would remember D.J. Mercurio and Caitlin McGinnity, Alice Lloyd, Helena Tiedemann, Molly Kate McKenna, who made the centennial issues of The Lantern, that is, the 2009 and 2010 editions, probably the best in the long history of that publication, though in all fairness there have been some really, really good ones since, I think, 2010. While she was at Westover, she gained recognition for her poetry on, Felicity gained recognition for her poetry on the state and national levels. In 2009, in her junior year, she won the National Patricia Grod Poetry Contest sponsored by Kenyon College. There were 1,400 participants that year and one prize, which was included publication in the Kenyon Review of the winning poem. Also in 2009, she was Impact Connecticut's state poetry champion, and in 2010, in her senior year, she was a National Gold Key for Poetry in the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. She's currently a senior at Yale and expecting to graduate in December with a major in English literature in the writing concentration. If minors were granted at Yale, she would have two, one in psychology and one in French. After graduating from Yale, she's considering studying for an MFA and then a PhD. While at Yale, she has been one of 6 sophomores to receive a Maynard Mack Fellowship in the Humanities, which took her to the Orkney Islands to research the poetry of George Mackay Brown and write a poetry chapbook. She was named one of the 5 Connecticut State Student Poets in 2012. In the same year, she was enrolled at the Seamus Heaney Centre Poetry Summer School at Queen's University, Belfast, Ireland, where she completed a competitive workshop and seminar. And she is, as an undergraduate at Yale, one of the Yale Working Group in Contemporary Poetry, a graduate group that meets to discuss poetics. Her awards at Yale include, in 2013, first prize in the Williams Mystic Joseph Conrad Essay Prize, which is a national competition for college students that recognizes the best sea-themed essay or story. And she won it for her story titled The Selkie, which I haven't read, and I would very much love to do so someday. Also in 2013, she was a Norman Mailer College Writing Awards national finalist, and she won a Tristan Perlroth Prize for Summer Foreign Travel. In 2012, she was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa as one of the top 1% at Yale, and she received a Kingsley Trust Prize for Foreign Summer Travel. Also in 2012, she was named Connecticut State Poet, Yale College winner, and she's been named a Yale College finalist in 2011. And also in 2011, she won the Block Prize for the best freshman essay at Yale, an essay written on Alexander Pope's Rape of the Lock. Her publications include a poem that will appear in the New Republic in 2014, 2 poems in the Innisfree Poetry Journal also in 2014, 2 poems, poems that have appeared in Third Wednesday 2013, in the Connecticut Review 2012, in the Kenyon Review 2009, in Broken Bridge Review 2009, and in Long River Run 2007. In addition to academics, Felicity has found the time to do other things while she's been attending Yale. She's worked as production and editorial intern in New York Public Radio. She's worked as a public affairs intern at the U.S. Embassy in Paris, France, as a public school intern at the Cooperative Arts and Humanities School in New Haven, as a public relations coordinator for the Yale Women's Center, and as an intern at Chapel Haven ASAT program. But it's her poetry, of course, that brings her to us. And once you're introduced to her poem, you'll find, I think, that they pass the supreme test of lyric poetry in the way that they stay with you and continue to occupy a place in your mind. So much is that the case with me that there are just many passages from her poems that have become part of the way that I experience the world. For example, quiet farmhouses that sag at the eaves and molt shingles back to the snow. And in a poem that she just practiced reading here this afternoon to test the sound system, the little priest of a sparrow pockmarking the earth. Or the unforgettable picture of her and her mother cleaning out the attic, muddling in our old lives of summer wear and love letters and moths. That word muddling just dazzles me. And perhaps most memorably for me, every view of the night sky in winter is now accompanied for me, by these words. Overhead, Orion stokes his line of fires, kindling the old love we have for our bones. Like all really good lyric poetry, her poems have a way of, in Ted Kuzer's words, engendering in us deep and resident feelings, and a way as well of increasing our attention to the moment and encouraging us to live more fully in the present. Among her many gifts as a poet are her clarity of vision, her musical ear, her sharp-eyed eye for detail, and especially detail from the natural world, her fresh turns of phrase and apt images and figures of speech, and something that simply can't be taught, and that is her natural voice, which makes her readers feel addressed in a quite spontaneous and natural way. That's not to say that her poems, come easily to her necessarily. Yeats, in speaking of the task of the poet, said, "A line may take us hours, may be, yet if it does not seem a moment's thought, our stitching and unstitching has been gnawed." And as Felicity made clear to us in a workshop she gave earlier this evening, her poems are often the product of her willingness to do a great deal of stitching and unstitching in revision after revision until she has achieved the desired results. Well, all this goes to say that we're really fortunate to have her, Felicity Sheehy, here with us tonight. I should add that after the reading there will be a short time for questions that you might want to ask her. And would you join me now in giving Felicity Sheehy a warm welcome.
much, Mr. Coffin. Thank you all for coming. I'm really amazed that there are so many of you here, and I'm touched. As you know, I went to Westover, and I spent many Friday afternoons at these readings. I'm just so honored and honestly surprised to be up here myself. The strength of Westover's community has never ceased to amaze me, and it's really a privilege to be here and to be able to share my work with you. I'm going to be reading a big swath of things tonight. Some things that I wrote in this very library, actually, some things that I've been writing in college, and some work that I've been working on as recently as this past month, actually. I'm going to start with two of the newer poems, both of which are animal poems. One was loosely inspired by a turkey who essentially came to live at my parents' house. She really liked heights. She would spend most of her time on the garage roof, the house roof, my personal favorite, the car roof. I'm making it sound comic, but it's actually not. Okay, this first one is called Wild Turkeys. That August, we saw her first in the garden, by the tomatoes and somewhere past the kale. This bird with bits of greenery in her beak, following the scritch-scratch of her feet. Because we were those kind of people, we named her Gertrude. For weeks she spoke in soft two-note calls. Her feathers drifted over the yard, and once we found her perched on the roof, cooing serenely. All this time you were shuffling around in worn-out slippers, jittering your cup of tea from one room to the next. There are lines we cannot cross, like the row of turkeys we saw one morning, stretching its way across the field. We could come close and no closer. Why did it matter so much when I found the feathers by the driveway one evening, still holding the tread of a tire? You sat me down and told me all the reasons I was wrong, the color, the timing, the size. I could not stop thinking about it. Because I'd seen the tremor in your hands growing stronger, and because I'd seen the turkeys lose each other and run round and round the circumference of their cries. Whatever I do, I cannot tell you why it matters, any more than I can tell you where they go, or where we go, or why all winter I followed the tracks of little feet that led to nowhere. To snow probably, or sometimes to the sky. This second one is loosely inspired by a whale watch that I took a few years ago. It's called Whales. You'll have to forgive us for what we do, how we gasp, how we shout, how we pull out our cameras and suddenly clasp hands. It's just that you are so much more than us, with our 10 fingers and opposable thumbs, our noses, our 2 feet, each firmly in view. You are what we have always longed to be, bigger than ourselves, 60 feet and 30 tons of blue-gray leaping body. There are no limits for you. That's why we take home your songs on little CDs to play in the shower, why we come out on boats in rain slickers to catch the spray off your tail. It's to remember all the things we used to believe, that your eye held the eye of God, and that we could ride you if you chose us, that we could return to what was before land, to what is blue, unboundaried. To write that last poem, I did a bit of research on the sort of myths that have been told about whales in North America and in Oceania. This is an approach I've taken with 2 other poems that I'm going to read. I've always been sort of drawn to modernizations of fairy tales, retellings of fairy tales. And I've written one based on Beauty and the Beast. It's called, suitably enough, Beauty and the Beast. The best versions begin with roses. It doesn't matter how it happens, whether Beast slights a warlock or a banker, whether Beauty lives in 1800s France, or telescopes her way through history to today. All that matters is that one night, Beauty's father picks a rose. We know that her sisters receive compasses or maps, denim jeans and gingham skirts, even books with slabs of chocolate between the pages. The rose is for beauty. The stories say that while the others flock to their gifts, Beauty stands to one side, watching the petals drop in the water. She is not surprised when the beast returns, when he makes his demand. She goes to adorn the house, where she wanders room to room, blooming in the mirrors and the glass. What the stories do not say is how all this time Beast sits in his room, panic-stricken, watching the well-upholstered bed and the checkered cloths, the gilt frames, the shining surfaces of the family hardwoods. How he listens for her at doorknobs, how the cups and saucers, the china and the plates now leap out of his hands. How it happens that all around the house, all by themselves, the roses grow, like rope, like little fragrant knots. Take a water break, which is impossible to do at a poetry reading without it being a little awkward. I managed to do it on David Letterman. It doesn't look awkward at all, but when you're up on a podium, okay. The second poem I'm going to read you is also a modernization of a fairy tale. And it's based on a Scottish fairy tale that you're probably less familiar with. I only learned it about a year ago. And actually, the version that I learned is quite different from the actual version. So if you do know it, you might be thinking, what is she talking about? It's called The Light Princess. And the general premise is that there's a princess, of course, and that her parents have died. Her power-hungry aunt locks her in a tower and starves her until she loses so much weight that she floats out the window into the sky. And the only way that she can save herself is by summoning up tears in herself and crying. So then she'll retain gravity and fall into the arms of the man that she'll marry. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. What struck me about this was, not only sort of how silly it was, but also, how cruel it was in many ways, and how it just sought to humiliate its main character. And so I wanted to retell it. So, of course, I wrote a poem. This next one is called The Light Princess. The storytellers knew that suffering, like joy, can weigh nothing at all. So they created the Light Princess and locked her in a tower, gave her air and sun to eat, dressed her up in clouds. They scribbled in their notebooks when, as expected, she slipped through the bars. Like fools, they thought they would find her again. But she had become nothing. It suited her. In the belly of the sky, she could watch their tiny world tuck itself in, wake itself up, illuminating and re-illuminating its scuttling skeleton of lights. It meant she could watch what others left behind. It meant she could take part in their absence. The storytellers did not know what to do. So they made up this tale. When it rains, they said, she is crying for all the things we want her to want. A plan and a hope, a body, and then a prince to catch her fall. Next I'm going to read a large number of poems that have been somehow inspired by places. This first one is named after a park quite close to my house that is probably the worst maintained park I've ever been to. It was land bought up by Donald Trump, and when he couldn't build a golf course there, he just sort of abandoned it. So it's called technically Donald J. Trump Park, but there's no trail map, there are no trail markers. The trails are sort of overgrown, but it does have its charms. Believe me or not, it does. Its colloquial name is Indian Hill, and the poem is called On Indian Hill. I go for a walk because the world is not as it was or would be, and there is room now for the leaves and the squirrel bones, for the small hollows of animal lives. There is no trace of the feet gone before me, and no wind, so even the trees have wilted like fallen birds that sweep into clouds, that rain with rain or with feathers. I go for a walk because the air recalls the end of things, and the walls of colonial homes have emerged, built on Indian trails that drag their way over this hill and out of the world. I go for a walk because there is no sound here and no sense, only the last puff of a milkweed pod, speaking in a small voice of snow. This next one is named after a bridge in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, that I was lucky enough to visit a few summers ago. Uncle Tim's Bridge. August in the bay is stretching its long legs out with the tide, each fiddler crab hustling the verb of its body back to the water, where the light lies fishing for shells, glinting on and off, into windows, out of stars. This is where you come after so much dull echoing from long city streets, from the careful checklists of tasks to complete or people to impress, from anxious hours peering into screens, Googling words like West 66th Street and Lost. For you, it has all come down to this suddenly peopleless space, where the world breathes with the tide and marshy creatures run in and out of their lives, where at last you can watch whatever golden stories you have told spin out, sally forth without you. Since leaving Westover, I've written quite a few beach poems. It's my small rebellion. And many of them were bad, I promise, for all the reasons that Mr. Coffin says. But there are 3 of them that I think actually do pass. And I'd like to read them for you tonight. And the first one I actually discussed in the workshop. And I'm sorry you have to hear the story again, guys, but it's remarkable because it took me about 2 years to write. Maybe that's the trick for beach poems. I wrote the first stanza in 2011, and I only finished it this past October. It's called Housework. I have washed the curtains and starched them, kneaded the bread, shook out the wicker rugs, polished the small faces on the silver bowls. They wink at me across the morning. I have changed nothing. So I go where the sea takes its time, pressing and repressing the wet sand, shaking its lacy curtains over the shore, turning and returning each crab, every shell, going blue and white and gold. There is nothing to it. Where the light makes quiet chinks in the sky, I can see the Arctic birds, pulling the clothesline of their wings from one hemisphere to the next, even now doing and undoing the clouds. The second one also took a remarkably long time to write. I had the last line when I was here at Westover, but it did not find a home until April of this past year. This one is called Stratus. Late at night, the sea swallows the stars and rests on its stomach. Its breathing slows. Along the shore, a long light closes its eye into sleep. Somewhere a tether catches and gives and catches, the hours silver. So I lie in a boat and slip beneath the skies, unseen. So I am a fisherman on a fish-belly sea. And this last one is called Swimming. Whatever there is between us, whatever strangeness, whatever I did or did not say, whatever you thought or did not think, let it go with the small sandpiper in his monk's cap, who wheels out, testing the water with a wing. All along the bay, the house lights are turning on like lilies, flinging their white necks from the sides of roads, women at chopping boards and men at sinks, nothing hidden. Look, the still pool of the sky surfaces a star. Now I'm going to go back in time a bit and read an old favorite that I wrote while I was here, driving north. Sometimes I think upstate is the best place for coming clean. There are all these quiet farmhouses stoking their fires next to the highway, even the ones that sag at the eaves and melt shingles back to the snow. There, to the left, a husk of a barn twists its spine back on itself, one of its screens swinging in the wind, the way the one-legged mallard, perched on the watering hole, cranes his neck to tuck in a tail feather. And here I can stop fiddling with time, stop looking back, stop expecting things. There is only the little priest of a sparrow pockmarking the earth, and the dust from his beak snowing back to my car, and all the hours I have that are gone and left for vanishing. This next poem draws on, I think, the same landscape that Driving North is situated in. It's named after a town in upstate New York, just outside Buffalo. This poem is called Lockport. Come summer, night rises clear and cool, slate blue like water off Lake Erie, and each house down the street from yours clicks on a porch light. Past the road sign, the parking lots turn incandescent, all quiet but for the churn of tires against the street gravel, and the now and again pop of a firework in the west. There is nothing for you here. The small weight of your life has followed you, and you settle into the earth, the small sounds of crickets, the mint. All around you the fireflies rise up and down, turn on and off, like promises. Another awkward break. All right. Now, now I'm going to read a number of poems that I wrote while I was on fellowship in Orkney. When I was a sophomore in college, I was lucky enough to get this grant that let me go anywhere in the world to complete an independent project. And I chose to go to Orkney, which is a group of islands just north of Scotland, and in my opinion, probably the most beautiful place in the world. I wrote a collection of poems, some of which I'm going to read for you today. These first two that I'm going to read were written rather miraculously on the same day, in my little apartment overlooking Walkmill Bay. It was a summer solstice, which in Orkney means that the sun sets around 11 o'clock and it never really gets dark. This first one is called Rooms. I like leaving places, like hearing the final click of a door in a socket, or letting the shine of a window fill with new color, untouched by a sudden hand or shadow against the glass, just the room breathing in its secret places, some undefeated dust. Whoever comes next will fill the room with her bustle of suitcases and shoes, will wonder about the tulips, blooming now in a crystal vase, and step through the coolness there in the small space between carpets. When she goes to the window and rests her hand on the sill, she will notice, perhaps, across the cows and the gorse, at the line of the horizon, a small smudge, the cloud fall of another island's rain. And the second one is called 3 Days Alone. Only then will the house present itself. The morning shine of the teapot next to the cheeky turn of the milk bowl. The radiator will speak in pops and whistles while the toaster finishes a rush job, and the washing machine mulls things over with you in your slippers and robe, smelling of coffee. Only then will you gather your papers and sit by the window, where the ferry winks in and out and the trucks renew their promises of fresh bread and haggis. Only then will you fiddle with pencils or twist your hair, Mark down your life with rings of teacups, writing the poem 3 days alone. Most people who visit Orkney are nature enthusiasts of some sort, and many of them are ornithologists. I got to know a group of them when I was hiking to the Old Man of Hoy one Saturday. The Old Man of Hoy is this remarkable sea stack that is just off the island of Hoy. To get there, you have to take a ferry from the mainland, and by the mainland I mean the Orcadian mainland. That's what they call it. And then hike through fields and fields of sheep up a mountain. And once you reach the top, the Old Man of Hoy will be right there, and you can lie along the cliff and look straight down and see thousands and thousands of seabirds. It's really remarkable. And this next poem I'm about to read on, I would say, draws on this landscape. It's called Ornithology. You're not good at lying in wait by slits in wooden hides, or crawling on your stomach through moorland to peer over cliffs for a single shimmering egg. These specialists with their brimmed hats and new binoculars, their careful speech and mind for populations, 200,000 off these cliffs alone, delight you. They talk of specimens and graphs. Their print marches bird-like over lined pages. Still, in these open places, you find yourself wandering off through common scurvy grass and kidney vetch, past the delicate balloons of sea campion and the yellow tongue of bird's foot trefoil, speaking the names of the unseen: curlew, razorbill, skua, whittier, kittiwake. This incantation of words, of wings. My voice has given up on me a little bit. Okay. All right. This next poem is named after one of Orkney's 2 cities, which has about 1,200 people. It's called Stromness. It's a beautiful old stone gray fishing village, built on a hill with little passageways running up and down from the top levels of the village to the bottom. And what I tried to do in this poem was capture the feel of this place around the summer solstice, when the days were getting longer and longer and everything was getting greener and greener. But the temperature stayed steadily around 50 degrees. It's called June Stromness. Perhaps it is the sense that this is all too much, that we have not deserved it or worked for it, that this is easy, which gives us pause. You sense it in the green offerings of rhubarb by grey doors, or the hand of a shopkeeper testing the open window, the fisherman who holds out his cap to lap the northern stars. Can we, in our quiet houses, forgive this light that tips from dusk to dawn, that rests a golden finger on the midnight sky, and opens this hinge of the world to let the color through? This next poem is meant to be more comic, I'd say. It takes its title from some advice an Orcadian gave me when I thought I might have been trespassing on her land. She said to me, "There's no trespassing in Scotland." And so the poem is also called There's No Trespassing in Scotland. So you hop the fence and take the footpath through the moors, running unrepentant past the yellow fists of gorse and the stumble of a rabbit's den, to the place where the world rejoins and you may breathe suddenly by the open mouth of the bay. It's here where the hard muscle of the Atlantic relaxes and the grey stones tuck into silt that the story changes. The eider duck and her ellipsis of ducklings, the ruined watchtower with a litter of bonfires, and the white bushes on the opposite hill that stand up unbidden to leap along the heather with sheep-like grace. This next one is the last of the Orkney poems, and I'll read for you tonight. It's special, I think, in that I started it my first night I was there, and I ended it the last night I was there. It's called Orkney. 2 hours or so, and the small darkness will smooth out the stars, tuck in the green corners of the earth, the folded hand. Here, where the daily mists blink in and out of, where the daily ships blink in and out of mist, and the only mountain paints the black reminder of itself on a cloud. This neat world is rudderless, floating between land and sky, like the belly of a fish or the back of a whale, just touching the surface to change. Your hand, where it rests on the sill, could pass through the glass and carry the toy cow that grazes on the horizon to yesterday, to today. I'm also going to go back in time again and read something that I wrote here in this very library, I think, actually, at Westover. It takes its occasion from my almost lifelong battle with bouts of insomnia, and it's called 3 a.m. Starlight is never enough to clear the way across the kitchen late at night when our lights and our neighbors' lights have long gone out. Still, I can trust on its presence, on the smallest gleam that turns the curve of the metal bowl, on the faint lanterns of Sirius and Polaris swinging down the line of heaven to where I am, the light from my childhood, my mother's childhood, somehow here in the darkness. It's how we live our lives, this moving from lightness to lightness, losing moments once we think of them, as time lets us leave only traces of ourselves. We are not the stars, not the dark chasms that loom between them, but the airplane, far above, pushing the small sound of itself across the sky. The next poem I'm going to read was actually inspired by a Conrad painting. The painting is a seascape, and in the work there's a large lighthouse and a small little figure walking towards that lighthouse with a basket on her arm. What I did in this poem essentially was imagine myself into that figure and think, what was her life like? And the poem that came out of it is called The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. My husband is a cold man, and so I make him bread, wrap it in old blankets, and take it past the field that tosses turns to the sea. Out here, the clouds build themselves up and over in the sky, and the water shines like blue linen clean off the line. I could forget the lighthouse. I could even forget the world, rounding its way ship by ship across the sky, but for the steady pull of his basket on my arm. The wind blows from the west. It turns the weather vane, rounds the cliff to the north. In the morning sometimes the window gleams with sun, making the kitchen glint with metal pots and cutlery. So much light blurring the room, there is only the space between me and the glass, filling with dust. Then I open the window and set the birds flying down past the chicory and seagrass to flit in and out of the water like fish. 2 hours from now, he will strike a match, light the kerosene lamp, and I will feel that slow heart of a beacon pass me over, breath after breath, to flash boats on and off in the dark. I'm next going to read a second kind of persona poem that I think is very different from The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. It's called The Futurist's Daughter. All his life, he did what he could for her. In the first grade, he switched to efficient bulbs early on, then invested in solar panels, bought up Apple stock to sell when the market failed. Once they left to spend 2 months in the back country, where she came to like Appalachian A-frames, and he read directions in the stars. The next year, they learned to write programs and hack servers, how to encode messages, design safeguards. Twice a year, they went to the doctor because there were better scans and modified flu medications, new prosthetics, and because medical immortality was possible in 20 years for her. This meant she grew up guessing the when, not the if. Nothing could stay. Cars would go, and certainly today's TVs, but also heart transplants and faith, emoticons and social customs, like sending a card, like holding a door. Still, they found airports difficult. They would hover by the security checkpoints, obsolete in 10 years, he shuffling his feet, she looking through her bags. As the same problem presented itself, again and again. They were two worlds, and she would always have a ticket to a place he'd never go. This next poem I actually started as a joke. It was called The Ode to Stuff, and it was about my inability to get rid of anything. But it sort of took on a life of its own, and now I think it really does hold its own as a poem. It's called Habit. What I want are 2-for-1s with 40% off, and oven mitts that hold hundreds of degrees, a Swifter and a closet expander, stuffed animals for the nieces I do not have, a fruit knife, now $5.99. I want to fill my cupboards filled with local penny savers and Shakespeare playbills, with cards from Ireland, hello from the old country, even drugstore receipts, shiny with fingerprints, with more stuff, signed CDs and New York brochures, love letters from long ago. I want to line my glove compartment with real gloves, with saints' cards and ribbons, with travelogues promising the true Northeast, the undiscovered West. I want to keep things with me. I want to keep driving with my dog in my car, filled to the brim, for miles and miles. I want to pull up to your house, running on fumes, and open the doors, holding out these things, saying, look here, look what I have for you. I'm going to take a small break from me for a bit. I'm going to read a poem by Kniesel Mueller called Alive Together. And it's a poem that's been very important to me because I think it's one of the few places in literature where I found something that has sort of haunted me for most of my life, which is the feeling that I could easily have been someone else or that I could not have existed at all. And it's sort of obliquely inspired the next set of poems that I'm going to read for you. So I thought I'd give you this one first, and then we'll continue on to mine. Alive Together. Speaking of marvels, I am alive together with you, when I might have been alive with anyone under the earth, when I might have been Abelard's woman for the whore of a Renaissance pope, or a peasant wife without enough food and not enough love, with my children dead of the plague. I might have slept in an alcove next to the man with the golden nose who poked it into the business of stars, or sewn a starry flag for a general with wooden teeth. I might have been the exemplary Pocahontas, or a woman without a name, sleeping in a master's bed for my husband, exchanged for a mule, my daughter lost in a drunken bet. I might have been stretched on a totem pole to appease a vindictive god, or left, a useless girl child, to die on a cliff. I like to think I might have been Mary Shelley, in love with a wrong-headed angel, or Mary's friend. I might have been you. This poem is endless. The odds against us are endless. Our chances of being alive together, statistically non-existent. Still, we have made it, alive in a time when rationalists in square hats and hatless Jehovah's Witnesses agree it is almost over. Alive with our lively children who, but for endless ifs, might have missed out on being alive, together with marvels and follies and longings and lies and wishes and error and humor and mercy and journeys, and voices, and faces, and colors, and summers, and mornings, and knowledge, and tears, and chance. That much sound is having. Okay. Okay. Over the summer, I started researching my family's history. I didn't find anything, really exciting. I'm not secretly related to Yeats. But what I did find mostly were the kind of, disasters and tragedies and heartbreaks that come before all of us and that made all of us. And I was just amazed at how much suffering these little documents could hold. And I started out with a much longer poem, but I settled on something a lot smaller. This poem is called Ancestry.com. Thanks to a few words in a search engine, I learned that Great-Grandma Beam got married at age 15 in a farm town outside Ontario called Welland, sometime before the First World War. The website showed her family graveyard filled with other Eatons, Ruby, Wesley, Lenora. Her name was Grace. At 16, she had the first of 9 children, one a year: Kenny, Barbara, Lolly, Beth. Their names a ladder down the document. You could watch the rungs fall out every time a child died. This next one is called John and Mary. They were given the most popular names of their generation, one a Baptist, one the Mother of God, so it was not a surprise to see them wedded together. You could make it a love story if you wanted. He an infantryman home from Europe, she a poor New Yorker with poor prospects. There is even something scandalous about it, a prior engagement broken in London, an age difference, meaning that only one had seen the First War. As much as they could be, they were happy. One worked and one didn't, one drank and one smoked. They had 3 daughters, each of whom did well enough. Every Sunday they visited their namesakes in the church, the little statues with water beneath, the little shrines with water beneath, and the statues done up in gray and white. She liked how calm Mary looked, giving up her child, and he liked how John only just held himself up from the water. Later they would sit in separate confessionals, telling smocked men their sins and desires, and all that they'd wanted from their lives. When it came time to wet their fingers and sanctify themselves one by one, they could pretend for a moment that they were strangers who'd only just met and exchanged some words in passing. This next one is called 2A. I like the note that you sent my father about the concert, probably the only time the Talking Heads ever came to Buffalo, and how you frightened your mother later with your rendition of Psycho Killer. Even better was the note you mailed to Mom and Pop with a shipment of California's finest chocolate, encouraging them to pig out, a pig drawn on the margins. What I mean to say is you are not forgotten. The picture of you in a Bills sweatshirt, the one you hated, sits firmly on the living room table, so you can be there, whether you would want to or not, every time the team loses. You should know that I have your room now, even though it looks nothing like the way you left it. There is a cross hanging over the desk, and your father has put tack stuff in the closet. You have exchanged your bed for a pull-out couch, probably because he couldn't bear to see it here. I had to go digging for you in the closet, but I found your old German papers and your law school notes, all your urgent, funny letters. We never met, so you'll have to forgive me. I can get carried away. It was at one time when, flying over San Francisco, I spent the whole day looking through 20 years and so much cloud for you. Next poem is one that I wrote at Westover. It was imagined as a letter to my grandmother, and it's called, suitably enough, Letter. Tell me first about the 3 ladybugs on your kitchen window, how the light filtered under their bodies to make them into miniature suns, and how the patterns from their wings skimmed for a moment over your hands. It is midsummer, and the fields outside your house are smoldering with corn, but you, I know, make your breakfast of cold cereal and pills, the milk in your bowl tinged with fluorescent light. You used to eat what you grew with your own hands, but put dirt under your fingernails. Heirloom tomatoes, moon and stars watermelon. It's too cold to garden now, you say. You mail me a drawing of flowers and some seeds. These are the days when all the beauty is leaking out of your life anyway, and you want me to have the linens, the rings, the bone china. You'll keep your TV. Its static reminds you of who you are, sounding from a distance almost like birdsong. This next poem, I wrote a few months after my grandmother's funeral this past summer. And what haunted me about this funeral in particular was the feeling that no one cared. This poem is called The Funeral. What we learned the day of the service was that the reception had been moved out of the church galley down the hall to the 3rd grade classroom decorated with cutout Christs and handprint turkeys. A motto hung over the door, "Be good." The priest showed us the way, sweating and swinging his bad leg, explaining that we would thank him later for the air conditioning. Inside, the desks were shoved to one wall with midsummer shabbiness, and a fold-out table perched its legs by the blackboard. We arranged the pictures at the front of the room, where they looked from their June barbecues and Florida vacations at the concrete out the window, gently steaming. Back in the church, the fans were running so loudly we couldn't hear ourselves, and the readings evaporated in the rafters, where the only things listening were the faces of window saints. Towards the end, the priest made a joke about the coolness of heaven. We followed him back to the air-conditioned classroom, which now held an array of danishes and cardboard boxes of coffee, half off from tops, he said. I drank cup after cup of decaf, lightening and lightening and lightening them with cream, watching the silent pictures watching us. How little we had in common. Their whole world had ended, while somewhere ours continued, past the flat voices and the shuffle around the room, past the borders of this town, where the fields filled with the flashlights of so many people looking for each other, flooding the world here, floors and floors beneath the stars. And the last poem I have for you tonight is called Homecoming. 2 months and still the color of the door surprises you, as does the look of the stove at night, the sky out the sudden window. The house balloons in its strangeness, so you walk down halls that didn't exist before, though everything is the same. The scuffed rugs and the discarded boots, the magazine covers looking up at you. Driving doesn't help because all your neighbors have followed the set paths of their lives like toys that wind up and do what they're told. Getting haircuts, changing their cars, cutting a lawn. How could they? It's as though you've checked into the lobby of another life, where the world makes and remakes itself in the eyes of other travelers and in the new furniture, in the bit of dark out the window, and in whatever starlight it holds pinned against the glass. ahead. Okay, yeah.
Were you like when you first came to Westover? Were you like originally this talented at writing?
Um, I got much better at Westover, I think it's true, but I had been writing for a while before that. My first poem when I was like 7. I mean, it wasn't very good, but I had been working on it, throughout middle school. I really came into my own at Westover, I think. Yeah. There was another hand. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware, but Joe showed us your place essay from sophomore year. And she told us that you did like 23 drafts of that, and I was wondering if that was true.
It might not have been 23, but I did rewrite it quite a bit. Yeah. I did rewrite it quite a bit. Yeah. To make things good, you have to rewrite them. I mean, all of these were drafted a lot of times. They don't just sort of come naturally onto the page. They're actually pretty horrible. People in the workshop know. Any other questions? Yeah.
So how do you know when you've got something that's good? How do you build up your confidence that now you have something that's...
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I like to read them out loud to myself, and when they sound right, when they flow properly, when the images used are interesting and unexpected. It's hard to say because it's almost intuitive. It feels right. But yeah, you just keep working at it, and I'll probably actually keep revising many of the ones that I read for you tonight because I can still make them better. I think there are several poets who do that. It's they read and then in their published books they'll find things that they don't like and they'll fix them. Yeah. That was,
I don't know why I would ask this, because I think they're in you, so you're continually working on them, but do you ever go back to poems that you wrote, now you've had, lots of years of writing poems, and learn from or wonder about the person that was?
oh yeah. Yeah, I think I've changed less than I would like, but but yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, a lot of my personality goes into my poems. It's easy to sort of read that into them. I think it's more striking actually when you read bits of prose. So if you read short stories, if you read personal essays, it's interesting to see how you saw the world back then. It's one of the benefits of writing a letter to yourself and then not reading it for 2 years later. It's something that we do at Westover. It's amazing to see sort of what good advice you gave yourself, 2 years ago. What happened to you since then? Any other questions? Go ahead.
Who is your favorite teacher?
Oh my God!
Oh, don't throw this spot.
That was cruel. Why did you do that to me? I have many favorites. I really do. That's not a lie. I have many favorites, and I'm actually not going to name them because I will forget one, and it'll be horrible. So I'm going to wimp out of that question, I suppose. There's a hand over here.
How do I impress Mr. Kaufman?
Revise. Just keep on revising. Just like be obsessive about your revisions. It'll help. Any other questions? Yeah.
What was your first Lantern poem?
Oh. Morning Glories, I think. Yeah. Wrote it in Joe's sophomore English. Yeah. Yeah. Any others? Yeah?
How do you come up with it?
I read a lot. That helps. It really helps to read a lot of poetry. It gives you an ear for it, gives you a feel for it, and gives you the sense of what could make a good poem and what would make a not so good poem. Other Other than that, it's just really paying close attention to the world and seeing things that interest you, and trying to find the language that captures that. Trying to preserve things, hold things. That's the best answer I can give. Yeah. Yes.
Why did you decide to start writing poetry?
Oh wow. My mother used to read it to me when I was little, and I was always really interested in it. That's probably the best answer I could give. I wanted to do what I had read. I was really inspired by it. Yeah. There's another, yeah.
What inspired you, something you learned from Westover you still carry on or use when you write it?
Sorry, I didn't actually quite hear that. Sorry.
Something you learned from Westover, going from here, and then you still carry on and use when you write your poems.
Oh, something I learned at Westover. There's so much that I've learned at Westover. And I'm not kidding about that. I think that the attention to grammar is actually very helpful for writing poetry, believe it or not. I also think that just the sense of, what makes a good poem, what makes a good topic, the continuous revisions, yeah, Westover was great. What, yes?
What are you going to do in your future? Do you have plans?
Oh, I wish I had concrete plans. In the future, I'm hoping to go to graduate school, I think, and then from there maybe become a teacher of some sort, of poetry, hopefully. Any other questions? Yes.
One more.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Who's your favorite poet, if you have one that inspires you?
I would say that my favorite current poet, because it changes, is Lisa Mueller, whose poem I read for you tonight. All right, thank you all.
Grace, do you have to take this all down?